In the timeless turn-based strategy game Heroes of Might and Magic 3, players have to constantly make well thought out decisions about what army they should bring and build towards, what secondary skills they must have, which hero they should pick as their main, and many other choices. All of this so they can effectively complete key map objectives and ultimately claim victory. I am fascinated by the complexity of this game, and my goal is to understand all of it and to uncover the best strategies so that you too can ultimately claim victory. Because as they say, knowledge is power. Today, we're taking a look at one of the most fundamental functions in the game, damage calculation, and mainly how it's affected by the attack and defense skill. To answer the question, which one is best? So imagine the following scenario. You have spent weeks, perhaps even months of in-game time gathering your army, building up your hero, and now you're ready to face off against your opponent. Your army is a somewhat mixed bag of long-range shooters, melee fighters, perhaps even a couple of dragons, and some other guys. You spot your opponent in the distance, and to your surprise, he not only has the exact same army as you do, but he also has the exact same primary skills as you. Now, because this is a made-up scenario, let's assume we also know that he has the exact same secondary skills and magic available as you do, which, for simplicity's sake, are none. No secondary skills, no magic. At this point, you are targeting your opponent's hero and you are ready to attack. But before you do, a leprechaun jumps up and makes your proposition. He will, free of charge, give you the option to reset your attack and defense skill points so that you basically have 50 free skill points, which you can allocate as you want between attack and defense. Now the question is it in your interest to do so? And how? Full attack, full defense, or some kind of mix? The easy answer should be that the attack skill is definitely to be preferred because of the way the game mechanics work. But is that always the case? Under which conditions should you choose attack over defense and vice versa? As always with the game of Heroes of Might and Magic 3, the answer is complicated. Let's break it down. To understand whether we should choose to enhance our attack or defense skill, we first need to understand how the game calculates damage in combat. The equation for determining a certain creature stack's damage looks like this. At first glance, it looks very confusing, but that is only because the formula includes all possible damage modifiers. In the first part of the equation, we have the base damage of the creature in question, which can be found in the stats window, and most have a range of a minimum and maximum damage they will do when attacking. The left part of the equation deals with everything that can increase the base damage, things such as secondary skills like archery or offense, and the right side of the equation deals with all possible modifiers that can reduce the base damage, such as armorer or the shield spell. Now the question we want to answer is whether we should enhance our attack skill or enhance our defense skill, and therefore we can now simplify the equation to its absolute basic components by shortening it so it now looks like this. The variables I1 and R1 denote the attack to defense difference between two creatures. If the total attack skill of the creature attacking is higher than the total defense skill of the creature being attacked, I1 is going to be positive, and R1 is therefore ignored in the final calculation. The opposite is of course true if the defense skill is higher than the attack skill. The game gives a 5% bonus to damage for every point the attack value is higher than the defense value, up to 300% for a total of 400% damage dealt. A defense advantage gives a 2.5% damage reduction for every stat point difference up to a maximum of 70%. So, to calculate the final damage, we take the base damage of the creature, multiply by the number of creatures that are in the stack, and then increase or decrease the damage based on what the attack to defense difference is. Let's use regular angels in our example, because they have a flat damage output instead of a range. Say your hero has a 15 in both attack and defense, while your opponent only has 5 points in each. If you both have 10 angels and you attack first, your angels are going to deal a base damage of 50 times 10 angels plus a 50% damage increase because you have 10 extra attack than your opponent's defense for a total of 750 damage. If your opponent is the first to attack, they will deal a base damage of 50 times 10 plus a penalty of 25% because of the 10-point attack to defense difference for a total of 375 damage. Note that this is a very simple example where angels are attacking identical angels, so we don't have to look at the difference between two different units' attack and defense skills, which also have to be taken into account. So if those same angels were attacking 10 battle dwarfs, the total attack to defense difference would be 23, and therefore the angels would deal 115% increased damage, while the damage they received would be reduced by 57.5%. Now, before we go on to the question about how to distribute our skill points, we first have to take a closer look at an important aspect of Heroes 3, and that is that the game mechanics themselves favor attack over defense in most situations. We have already seen this in the damage calculation. You get a 5% more damage for every attack point, while you only get a 2.5% damage reduction with every defense point advantage. Now you might say, well, that's neat, but what good does all this extra damage do if I can't stay alive? Well, let's take a closer look at the game mechanics and how good players actually play Heroes 3. There are several key concepts to master in order to become a great Heroes 3 player. One of the most important ones is the concept of a power stack. A power stack is usually your biggest stack of high-level units, and they are your main damage dealer. Now, they don't necessarily have to be of high level like angels or wyverns. Even goblins or gremlins can be a power stack, if that's what's available to you. The important thing is that they are the stack of creatures which deals the most damage. The way good players utilize the power stack is by accompanying them with a lot of one stacks, like this. The Wolf Raiders in this example are the main power stack, and all the one stacks of goblins have two purposes. One, to protect the Wolf Raiders by distracting and splitting up the enemy units, and 2, to take the retaliation off the enemy so the Wolf Raiders take no damage in return when they attack. Now some of you might laugh and say, ha, are you using Wolf Raiders as your power stack? And to you I have only one thing to say.
Keep my
Wolf Raiders
name out your fucking mouth!
It is pretty clear that when using this basic but very essential strategy of having one main damage dealing stack accompanied by many one stack units, that it is in your favor to have as much attack skill as possible, thereby dealing as much damage as possible, while the defense skill becomes completely irrelevant, because your main power stack gains no benefit at all from reducing the damage taken, because, well, they don't take any damage at all. The same is true if your power stack consists of ranged units. Here, the one stack's job is to protect the main damage dealer while simultaneously distracting the enemy units so that your archers can fire as many shots as possible. Choosing defense over attack skill in this situation would also be quite foolish, because it's a lot more effective to just deal as much damage as possible standing far away instead of prolonging the fight and having to ultimately brawl close up with your archers. Remember that ranged units also get a 50% melee damage penalty, therefore making it of paramount importance that they deal as much damage as possible while they still can shoot. There are of course also some scenarios where your defense skill becomes more important. For example, if the enemy you're up against is faster than your fastest unit or they can reach across the battlefield and attack you in a single turn. If you're up against a pack of archangels, for example, it's going to be very hard to get away from that fight without taking some serious losses. At this point, your losses will undoubtedly be less if you have focused on increasing your defense skill. The same is also true if you don't really have a definitive power stack. In the very early stages of the game, your army may consist of a mixed bag of different units, and in this case, completing key map objectives may be difficult. Having that extra damage reduction to protect the units you intend to make into future power stacks may be very helpful. Now, I'm not saying that the defense skill is completely useless, just that in most cases it is vastly superior to rather increase your attack skill, and the game mechanics definitely support this. Now let's take a look at how this difference in attack and defense actually looks like in combat by doing some tests. The Angels are a prime candidate to do these kinds of tests, because they are one of the few units in the game that has a flat damage range, 50 damage for both regular Angels and Archangels. Testing for different amounts of units against an enemy that has 25-25 in attack and defense yields these results. As we can see, the results are very clear. The player who gets the first move wins the battle, no matter how the skill points are distributed, except for two outlier cases. The first number in the remaining column shows how many units are left after the battle, and here we can make some interesting observations. While the full attack data behaves predictably, showing that we can expect to do about twice as well against the base case scenario, the defense results are a bit strange. In every single fight, we win with just one angel remaining. Now the reason for this is quite simple actually. You see, because the base case has 25 in attack and defense, it stands to reason that if both players could attack at the same time, they would deal the exact same damage. Take the 50 in full attack for example. His angels have a 25-point attack advantage over the opponent, but the 25-25 player also has a 25-point advantage over the full attack player. These stat points effectively cancel each other out. What determines who wins the battle then is who attacks first, because the first attack will decrease the opponent's total number of units so much that they in every subsequent round will be at a worse disadvantage than the round before. Now as for the full defense player, he has a 25-point defense advantage, as does his opponent. But having this defense advantage also means that the first attack in combat is not nearly as damaging as it was in the full attack case. In fact, what happens when we test it out is that the two players are left with the same number of units after the first round, and really in almost every round after that. So because the number of units only decrease by a marginal amount, the two players can keep trading basically equal damage in every round. So because none of the players can overwhelm the other in terms of numbers, they end up grinding each other down until the final 2 units are left, where the first to attack wins the battle. If there's one thing we can learn from this data, it's that greater army numbers and having speed priority are way more important than stat points. But there is also something else to take away from these tests. As you can see, there is a number in parentheses in the dataset. These numbers represent the number of units left if the player uses the defend option every turn. The defend option takes the unit's total amount of defense and adds a 20% bonus on top of it. So if a unit has 30 in defense and chooses to defend, it gains another 6 points in defense for a total of 36 until the unit gets to move again. Now the reason this is interesting is that, as you can see in the data, whenever the full attack unit chooses to use the defend option, it loses every time. But when the base case and full defense player uses it, their results improve dramatically. In the most extreme case, with 50 angels, the full defense player goes from winning the battle with 1 angel left to winning the battle with 19 angels left. In other words, when it comes to 1v1s, using the defend option and utilize the extra 20% bonus to defense is way better than actually attacking, given that you are even or have a defense skill advantage. And because the defense bonus caps out at a 28-point difference, I could make an even better combination of stat points. Having 10 in attack and 40 in defense maximizes the defense bonus while defending, and as such, this player will win the battle with 34 angels left. Of course, these results only show what happens when each player only has 1 unit left, with no magic and so on. But it is still quite interesting to see how big of a difference the bonus from using the defend option can be. So now that we have looked at how the attack and defense skill work with single units fighting, we have to turn our attention to our original problem with 7 units with different stats and specialities, to see if we can find a solution to how we should distribute our 50 stat points. So I started testing again, and the results were, well, underwhelming. I started by first testing out AI versus AI combat, and in every instance, except for one outlier, the attacking hero lost the battle, both on an open field and in siege combat. Now these are some incredibly strange results, because we as human players, and as we have just seen in the previous dataset, know that having first move in combat is extremely valuable, and not just for casting spells, but having the speed advantage in combat to move before your enemy does is something that lets you take control of how the battle progresses. I don't think that we can use these sets of results to say that there's always a definitive advantage to being the defender, but at the very least, this shows that the AI is not capable of taking full advantage of having the speed of first move advantage. Now some of you who have played the game for some time will say that's because the AI is pretty stupid and just rushes all of its units forward as soon as it gets the chance, and so they don't utilize the speed priority. Well, that is partially true. If you watch one of the test battles play out, we can see that the AI is thinking about protecting its archers, but quickly abandons that plan and goes full smork instead. I did of course try all the different settings with myself controlling the troops against the AI, and because I am human and therefore vastly superior to the puny Heroes 3 AI, I of course won every battle. But the problem is that I did not notice any significant differences in having full attack versus having full defense. The amount of units I had left after the battles were about the same. I also tried a 10-40 strategy, but once again no discernible difference, so I did not get a lot of information out of these tests. The main problem with finding a concrete answer to our original question in this particular context is that there are way too many and way too different units in play. We have to think about the 2 ranged troops, the melee brawlers, the champion's jousting bonus, and the dragon's breath attack. So as for the leprechaun's proposition, you can tell him dealer's choice, mix it up. There are simply way too many variables in play, and it is therefore very hard, if not impossible, to design tests that give accurate and reliable information that we can act on.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
But how should you distribute your skill points throughout the game then? Well, we know the early and middle stages of the game heavily favor the attack skill because of the way a player can utilize a power stack of units of either ranged or melee or both. And although the defense skill is better suited to handle very fast and magic immune units as well as Dragon Utopias, the attack skill is still way better because, well, the player can choose which fights to take. It is undoubtedly better to increase your attack skill early on and thereafter acquire artifacts that can make up for the lack of defense. But as the game goes on and reaches the late stages where armies become big, I would say that there are 2 possible ways to handle the stat distribution question. For one, if you believe that your main power stack or army in general will be bigger than your opponents, the best strategy for you will be to go for as much attack skill as possible and try to overwhelm your opponent early on in the battle. If you, however, believe that you will have the smaller army / power stack in the final battle, defense should be the skill that you give the most attention to. Now obviously, none of these tests show the full picture. As soon as you include spells, luck, morale, terrain, artifacts, and possibly the most important, differences between army compositions, the picture becomes a lot more messy. But that's okay. You see, that is kinda the whole point of Heroes of Might and Magic 3, that every game is different, and depending on what kind of situation you're in, you have to adapt your strategy and make the best decisions in order to achieve victory. I have many ideas and things I want to test out, but what always happens when I decide to make one of these videos is that I have a simple idea for a 5-minute video and then I start to cram more and more things in because the game is so complex that it is impossible to give a short answer to even the simplest questions. So if you would like to see more of this kind of Heroes 3 content, consider subscribing. It really gives me the motivation to actually write, edit and make these videos. And if you enjoyed this video, why not give it a thumbs up, perhaps even a comment for the algorithm. And yeah, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.